Welcome back, biology students. Happy Valentine's Day. I hope you had a great weekend and maybe you got caught up on the Olympics. I've been watching the replays on Paramount, which I enjoy. So today we're going to start talking about vocabulary that we need to understand this next chapter. So this next chapter sets us up for talking about meiosis, reproduction, and genetics. And all of these terms are used to describe the process. So if we understand the words in the first place, right, because a lot of these are going to be new words for us, if we understand the words, we're going to better understand the concept. So we're going to go through the vocabulary first. And dun, 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 there will be a quiz. So you can count on that for Thursday this week. We have a short week. Looking at asexual reproduction, A, remember, means not or without when it comes in front of a word. So it means without sex. So without fertilization, without the combination of two cells coming together. So it's reproduction in which one parent cell, specifically cell, produces offspring that are genetically identical to the parent. So it's going to create clones. So this amoeba, for example, is one cell to begin with, splits into two, and these two daughter cells are identical genetically as the original parent cell. This happens in starfish, yeast, bacteria. You're going to learn many different types of asexual reproduction tomorrow. What it is not is self-fertilization or self-pollination. So I think this is a confusing point for students quite often. Remember, I said that it's one parent cell, not one parent, okay? So some organisms can actually reproduce sexually by themselves. That's a combination of two cells. So in this case, this is only one plant, one flower, but it fertilizes itself by transferring its pollen to its own stigma, and then that will go down into the ovary and fertilize the egg. This would not be an example of asexual reproduction, even though it's one individual, because two cells, the pollen and the ovum, the egg, are both being used, okay? So one cell, asexual, two cells, sexual. So the flower taking the pollen to fertilize the egg, humans, the sperm fertilizes the egg. So reproduction in which the joining of a female egg, called an ovum, and a male sperm produced genetically different offspring. So these sperm carry a different set of genes than this egg, right? And when they combine, you're going to get a mixture of genes. So in this case, you're not going to get that clone. You're going to get a hybrid. You're going to get a genetic variant. You're going to get an organism that is genetically unique. So examples of this, the fertilization, as we see with animals, and pollination, as we see with plants. It does not require two separate individuals. Again, you're going to come across this tomorrow when you start talking about asexual reproduction. In some instances, individuals, even animals, may reproduce by themselves. So two individuals are not necessarily needed, right? But two cells are needed. So if it's an egg and a sperm combining together, that's sexual fertilization or pollination, sexual reproduction. So sexual reproduction is rather generic, right? Fertilization is a specific type of sexual reproduction. The joining of two sex cells, when we're talking about animals, for sure, right? Fusion of egg and sperm. Fusion means they're coming together, often confused with fission, breaking apart. So the fusion of the egg and sperm, as you see here, that is fertilization. What it is not, so often confused with fertilization in the garden, right? It isn't applying compost to your garden or any other nutrient. So the zygote, when the egg and the sperm come together, they form a zygote. The zygote, notice this cell, has two nuclei. So a fusion of the two cells, you can refer to this as the fertilized egg. So this is the egg and the sperm combining together to form the zygote. Not to be confused with the egg itself, the sperm itself, a spore from a fungus, for example, or the embryo. So notice there are several stages along the development of a fetus, and only that very first stage, the egg plus the sperm, the fertilized egg, that is the zygote. So the gamete is the sex cell itself. the sperm, the egg, okay? Egg is also called ovum or oocyte. Sperm might be called a spermatocyte. The sex cells are the gametes. They are made through a process called meiosis. They do not undergo meiosis. They are produced from meiosis. So notice these two cells here have sister chromatids paired up, right? And in the end, you only get one of each of those sister chromatids. So you only get a haploid cell instead of a diploid cell, and that there is your gamete. So meiosis produces these gametes, whether it's the female or the male. Spermatogenesis is going to form the sperms, the male gamete. Oogenesis is going to form the female gamete. Notice they don't occur quite the same. We'll talk about this difference in a minute. It is not the process of reproduction. It simply is the process of producing the sex cells, not fertilizing them. So spermatogenesis, you notice here, we have this diploid 2N. We have this diploid cell that's going to go through meiosis, and it loses half of its chromosomes the first round of divisions. It'll go through a second round of divisions where it once again loses sister chromatids. And then this individual will mature into what's called a sperm. So spermatogenesis, genesis is the creation of, right? Spermato, sperm. So it's the creation of sperm. Here's an example of using spermatogenesis in a sentence. In men, smoking levels affect spermatogenesis. So it affects their ability to make sperm. What it is not is a form of mitosis. Notice it goes through 2 rounds of divisions, and it is a reduction division, going from a diploid cell to a haploid cell, going from 2 sets of chromosomes to 1 set of chromosomes. Oogenesis, it's referring to the egg. So it's the formation of the female gametes. An example of using oogenesis in a sentence is that it begins before a girl is ever born. We can see that the two processes, oogenesis and spermatogenesis, do not occur in quite the same way. Notice spermatogenesis divides the first time into 2 cells, and oogenesis divides into 1 cell with 1 itty-bitty cell. And we'll talk about this later. This is called the polar body, and it will die off and not go through the second division. The male goes through the second division before forming sperm. The female, once again, will divide unevenly, and only 1 egg is released. So spermatogenesis forms 4 sperm, whereas oogenesis only produces 1 ovum. Sister chromatids, we've talked about before, they're the replication, right? So here's an individual chromosome, and then in the S phase of interphase, we made copies, right? And we call the copies sisters. So 2 identical copies of a single chromosome are called sister chromatids. What it is not is the paternal, referring to father, version of the same chromosome from the maternal, mom. So here I have a pair of individual chromatids. The purple might be from mom and the green might be from dad. So maybe they both carry information for hair color and eye color. Mom makes a copy of hers. She has 2 sister chromatids. Dad's makes a copy of his. He has 2 sister chromatids. The relationship between these are homologues. The relation between the 2 that are identical are sisters. So the homologues is dad's version of mom's chromosome, right? So you each have 46 chromosomes. So you got 23 from mom and 23 from dad. So mom's number 1, 2, 3, 4. Mom's number 1 has a homologue. Dad's number 1. Mom's number 2 has a homologue. Dad's number 2. So again, this is referring to a relationship. These are chromosomes that are similar in length, so we can identify them under a microscope, for example. Centromere position, the indentations, and the traits that they code for. So maybe they both code for hair color and eye color. Okay, so one chromosome might code for tall plants with white flowers. Maybe that's the blue. The homologue, the red, might code for those same traits, height and flower color, but it codes differently. Codes for short plants with red flowers and green seeds. So again, what is it not? These can often get confused. The homologues are not sisters. They are not identical. They are similar. Alleles are different forms of the same gene. Gene codes for a specific trait. So here I have two alleles for flower color. One form is purple and one form is white. In genetics, we write these alleles using letters, capital or lowercase. Here is a chromosome. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different genes on it. The genes might come in more than one allele. So here, these are the same alleles. Here, these are two different alleles, a small c and a big C. So maybe it calls for color blindness and not color blindness. So what it is not, it's not the entire chromosome. When you refer to an allele, you're referring to one gene, and each chromosome carries several different genes. It's just different forms of the same gene. The gene for height, tall or short. The gene for color, purple or white. The gene for eyesightedness, myopia, nearsighted, or perfect vision, emetropia. Okay, a gene, so we're talking about alleles, which are different forms of genes. The gene is that individual section of DNA that codes for a specific trait. So it codes for seed color, flower color, height. Notice I'm being generic there. The allele would be the specific form of that gene, okay? So here we can see the gene for making earwax. Here we have the gene for eye color, and it comes in two different versions, blue or brown, so two different alleles. What it is not is what you wear with t-shirts. It is not that kind of gene. Crossing over is an event that happens during meiosis where two homologous chromosomes exchange genetic information. Crossing over. So let's orientate ourselves with this picture. The two blues, these are sister chromatids. They're identical. Carries the same genetic information. The two purples are also sisters with each other, carry the same information, but they're homologues to the blue, right? They're carrying the same type of genes, but the gene might not be identical. So we can see you're carrying the capital A allele, which we'll refer to as the dominant allele, and the recessive allele, lowercase a, here. Dominant B, recessive B. Notice there is a switching that happens here. So during prophase, chromosomes get tangled up and pieces break off and they'll get reattached to a different chromosome. So then in the end, they create what's called a recombinant. So now we have a unique chromosome that didn't exist before. What it is not is a mutation. This happens all the time, right? So it's not damaging the DNA. You're trading genes of the same type. So like eye color is switched. So now instead of having blonde and blue, you might have blonde and brown. Instead of brown and brown, you might have brown and blue. So that is not a mutation. It's simply a genetic recombination. Synapsis refers to a coming together. So in this case, it's the coming together of homologous chromosomes during meiosis. So the green, two sisters, orange, two sisters, are homologous, carrying information for the same traits. They will pair up and form a quad, a tetrad, during prophase 1 of meiosis. So here you have two different tetrads. So synapsis is the coming together, forming tetrads. What it could be confused with is a synapsis referring to two cells coming together. So our cells can talk to each other by passing information sometimes, right? So we've talked about nerve cells communicating with other cells in our body. So this is a synapse between cells. So in this chapter, we're not talking about this type of synapse. The diploid is two sets. Di means two. So it means you have one set from your mom and one set from your dad. So here's three different sets of chromosomes. These are the homologous chromosomes, right? 1, 2, and 3. So an example, humans have a diploid number of 46. We have 23 chromosomes we got from mom, 23 chromosomes we got from dad. That's our diploid number. You refer to that as 2n. Write that down, 2n. What it is not is the same for every species. So rice, interestingly enough, has 24 chromosomes. So 12 from one parent, 12 from another parent. Humans have 46 and dogs have 78. So they got 39 from one parent and 39 from the other parent. They're unique for each species. The haploid number, hap means half. So it's only one set instead of two sets. So remember on the slide before we had 2 pinks, 2 blues, and 2 greens. One by itself of each is a haploid cell. And as we go through meiosis, you're turning a diploid cell into haploid cells. So you can see humans, for example, our diploid number is 46. Notice the 2N. Half of that is 23. So N by itself, right, divided by 2 is 23. Again, this is going to be unique for every individual. So meiosis produces gametes with a haploid number. What it is not is the number of chromosomes in a body cell. Our somatic cells are diploid. Our gametes are haploid. Okay, so that's all the new vocabulary. Now it's your turn. What are you going to do to remember these words? What are you going to do to be able to use the words in context? So you might make a Quizlet. You might make flashcards. You might make, I love this one. This is like a coverall, so the sticky notes have either the question or the vocab on it, and it's in your notebook, so you can study it anytime. And then when you lift your sticky note, it's like a reveal. So then you have the answer underneath. You could make a crossword. You could use the worksheet provided for you. You could try to make some paragraphs that use these words. A lot of these words would be used at the same time when talking about a concept. So maybe you could make a paragraph of a situation that uses many of these words correctly. So do something unique with this in your own way to make sense of the information and to practice it so that A, you can better understand concepts as they come at you this week and next week, and B, you can get a great score on Thursday's quiz. Okay, so I hope that's helpful. You guys have a great week. Bye-bye.